Alright, this week we're going to go with a Scott Sanchez pattern. This is a double bunny, really quick, simple pattern to tie, but the profile and everything is just about perfect. Great motion to this pattern. Disregard the mess here. We're in the middle of putting together a couple dozen white Octobers, so we're going to take a little break here and film a video. So like I said, we're going to do, this is the double bunny. Just a single hook pattern. Like I said, pretty quick and simple to tie. To start on this one, I'm just going to go with about a dozen wraps of 20 thousandths lead. I don't know, probably a little bit short of a dozen wraps. I usually don't throw a ton of weight on streamers. I don't like having a bunch of it, but this one serves kind of a purpose in a sense. It's a good way to gauge distances and everything. So what I want to do is just have this lead just shy of where I want to have my two rabbit strips tied in. I'm just going to cover this up with some thread real quick, and then I'm going to put some Estaz on this as a cover. You can get away with doing this. I mean, you really don't have to have the Estaz if you get really detailed in covering up this stuff with the rabbit, especially using Magnum strips. But this just gives you a little bit of assurance, and it flashes the fly up just a little bit. So I'm just going to get this Estaz tied in. This is just a regular peach medium Estaz. And we're going to spin this right over top of our lead, and I'm going to stop it right where I had my right where I had left off with my thread. So we're just going to peel this out, and you can see, I mean, just a really simple, easy wrap right there on this Estaz. Now this is where we start getting into the bulk of the fly. To measure this out, like I said, we're going to have two strips of Magnum rabbit. This one's going to be yellow. This is going to go on the bottom. And I'm going to half hitch here before I do anything else. Like I said, this yellow is going to go on the bottom, and it's really tough to tell because the air is so dry out here right now. There's so much static. This rabbit's just flying around everywhere. But you want your material, it would probably be easier to show this on the olive. It's not flying around as much yet. I haven't handled it. But you want your material going back toward the hook. So if you go tying it in this way, obviously you're going to have things standing up, and it's going to be going against the grain on the water, and it just won't give you the proper swim. So make sure that your material, as it's laying back, it's going back toward the rear of the hook. I just keep these strips in full. You save a little bit of material that way, trying to guess it and everything. So you save a little bit of material. What I want to do is I want to measure this out to be about twice the length of the hook. And that's not twice the length with the hide right here on the bottom. As you can see, that's twice the length with the material as I stretch it out. So you're going to be about twice your length. And then I'm going to have a tie-off point right here. It's not actually going to be tied off. My tie-off point is going to be way up here. But for a reference as to where I'm going to start gluing the material together, I just want to have this right here. So I measure this out right where the bend of the hook is, and then I'm taking this and I'm going right through the hook, and I'm going to bring this around. Like I said, we're not tying this section off. The only thing that we're going to tie off, the wet stuff. This static's just wrecking havoc on this thing. The only thing that we're going to tie off is right up here at the very front. So I'm going to flip this over and get a good section in here close to where I'm going to be tying this, and then I'm just going to trim. Peel all of your fibers back and cut this off. This way you don't have any waste. Everything's going to be nice and clean how you want it. And I'm just going to put a quick notch in here as to cut down on some of the bulk, so when you go tying this in and get there. So when you go tying this in, you're not going to have a huge mound of thread, because we're going to have to do this twice. So we're going to get this tied in here. I'm going to move that forward just a little bit, just shy of the eye of that hook. If you have a little bit of material going past that, that's fine, because we'll be able to cover this up with the thread wraps as we move forward. So we're going to fill that out. Nice mound of thread right there. Everything's nice and clean. We got the majority of the material out of our way. And then before we advance to the next section, I'm just going to take a little bit of Flashabou here. This is just gold Flashabou. You can use whatever color combination you want. I'm going to take probably 3 strands and double it over. Let me make sure that everything's good and lined up first. 3 strands, we'll double this over. So we'll probably have about 6 strands going down each side, and however much flash you want. If you're tying with some darker colors, probably could get away with a little bit less flash. Lighter, you can add some more. It all depends on what you want. But with this one, I'm just going to have the 6 on each side, and I'm going to run this down the side here. I'm going to cut this right at the hide portion. That way I'm not going the entire way back. You can see it's cut right at the hide right there. So my flash isn't running the entire way back. I have the nice lateral lines going probably just past the 3/4 mark on this pattern. Now, next on this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the olive, and I'm not going to measure this out just yet. I'm just tying this in right from the very end of the material. Like I said, not measuring this out. I'm not trying to cut it exact. I'm going to get rid of some of this hair here, so I'm tying just with the hide, and I'm going to set that right on top. And same thing, we'll just secure this down. Now, I'm going to stretch this out. I'm going to line everything up, and I'm going to have this marked to where it's going to be the same length. And then I'm just going to come in here with the razor blade, if I have one available. It's probably dull. Hopefully it cuts. Like I said, I'm just stretching this out, lining this up, and then I'm going to bring my razor blade in and just nick the hide on that. And I should have the same length both ways. So there we go. Everything's looking pretty clean right there. We got not exactly the taper that I was after for this head, but it'll be fine. We'll go ahead and just get a quick whip finish on here. You don't have to go crazy on your knots or anything, because we're going to wind up throwing some gel over the top of that for our eyes. Before we get to the eyes, what I'm going to do is take some adhesive, and this is just some tear mender. You can use, I try and stay away from like the super glue and everything like that. Try and find something that's for fabric. The super glue tends to get, it hardens up really it's extreme on the hardness of it when it sets, and it takes away from some of the motion. So this tear mender allows you to keep, I'll zoom out here a little bit so you can see what we got. This tear mender allows you to keep some flexibility in this pattern, and all I'm going to do is take a little bit of this and I'm going to dab it right on the old box of hooks here. A piece of cardboard works great, whatever you have that you're going to be throwing out, and it'll just hold some adhesive for you. Then I'm going to run this on my bodkin, and I'm just going to dab all the way through here, just touching the hide, and I'll spin the vise here so you can see how we have this applied. Then I'm going to set some right on the very top of this hook, and then get some on the hide here. A little bit of a mess there, but it's not too bad. Okay, so now you can see, I better zoom in, I guess. You get zoomed back in, and it's probably going to be tough to pick up because this glue is white and the hide's like a tan, so it's kind of tough to pick up, but you can see what we have right there. And then all I'm going to do is stretch this out, and then stretch out my olive. I'm not worried so much about this front portion where I have the Estaz tied in. I want some of that Estaz coming through. So there you can see it a little bit on that side. That Estaz is kind of pushing through right there. But then this top portion behind the Estaz, I have that glue just coming together, and you can just hold it like this for a couple of seconds. I mean, once it bonds, and it's pretty tacky to start with. Once it gets attached, you're not really too concerned about it coming undone on you. I mean, even as I was just pushing this down and it just had a little bit of tack to it, it was really wanting to bite. So don't get too concerned about you know, it coming apart on you or anything like that. You can work with the rest of this fly as that's drying. Now we're going to put the eyes on here. These are just 7mm earth eyes from the fish skull. And then we're going to take just a little bit of gel. I want this gel, or I want these eyes covering up part of my thread wraps and also going into the Estaz slightly. So it's going to do two things. It's going to cover up some thread wraps, and two, it's going to hide the transition and keep the Flashabou in place. So I'm just going to dab a little bit of this on here with a little bit of gel. We're going to set the eyes. Bring that back slightly. I want some of that front portion exposed. There's one. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Get our second. Make sure that these are lined up pretty good before this glue kicks on me. Everything looks pretty clean. And then if you want to, you can take some UV and go right in between these eyes where this makes this connection, because it just makes it a little bit more secure if you have this UV on here. That way you get a fish come in, you get a fish come in here and smack that top portion, then it's not going to be busting your eyes all over the place. So I'm just going to touch that with the torch real quick. Make sure everything's nice and clean. The eyes aren't going to be coming apart on a fish that comes in and eats. And you can do the same thing on the bottom as well. Last thing that I'll do, make Make sure, yep, we got good tack on that. I'm just going to come in here and color up this thread just slightly. There we go. Just going to cut down on that tone overall. Then I'll put some more UV on the bottom. Just fill in the gap in these eyes here. Hit that with the torch again. Looks pretty good. And there you have it. You can see with this, with the tear mender or the fabric glue that I used on this one, I mean the tail on this one's still flexible. It's still going to catch water. It's still going to catch the current and everything, and it's going to bounce around. As to where if I used a more aggressive glue like this gel or you know, some zap or whatever, this thing would be so rigid and it would just it wouldn't move at all. But you can see, I mean, that has plenty of motion to it. But there you go, there is Scott Sanchez's double bunny. If you guys have any questions or comments on this one, as always, leave them with me and I'll get back to you. But thanks again for watching, and we'll catch you next week.